Like most Adventist pastors, I spent 3 years up at Andrews University in Berrien Springs, Michigan, which is about 20 miles above South Bend, Indiana. And for your information, this time of year up there, this would be considered a spring-like day. I can recall walking to school when it was 15 below zero. The crunch of the snow underneath your boots when your car wouldn't start. But that Andrews University is where the Adventist Theological Seminary is located. And in order to receive the Master's of Divinity degree, you take 9 quarters, which is approximately 3 years. They do have very nice summers up there, however. Winters, not so much. On the campus of Andrews University is a church building that is patterned after our church. Did you know that? Called Pioneer Memorial Church. I've got a picture or two for you to show that. Pioneer Memorial Church, built after the pattern of Tacoma Parks Church. Only it's bigger. It seats about 2,100 people. And as you maybe will see, there's an extra aisle right down the middle, 2 on the sides, as in our church here. No side balcony, but there is one in the back. While I was there for 3 years, I rarely went to PMC. Probably 10 times or less did I go there for church. But I wasn't unchurched. I just didn't go to PMC, this huge church. But rather, Sabbath after Sabbath, I would make my way about a mile away from campus, and I would go to the basement of a nondescript older ranch house there in the neighborhood. A friend of mine, a good friend of mine, had told me about this other church called Home Church, and said, "You got to go to Home Church. You got to go to Home Church." And so, when I first went up there in the late 70s, the first thing I did was go to Home Church. And I found packed into this basement, finished basement, though not finished in any particular nice fashion, some carpet, a couch or two, a chair or two, a fireplace, wall-to-wall people, literally. The couches and the chairs filled up, but most of the people sitting on the floor. Just wall to wall. And you literally had to step around people to find a place to sit or to locate for the service. And there would be 40 to 50 people on a regular Sabbath morning meeting there, sometimes as many as 80 or 90, packed together in this house basement. And what an incredible time we had worshiping. I tell you, in a little basement, when 80 or 90 people are singing, it sounds really good. Especially when you're singing from your heart. And I have so many wonderful memories of Home Church. That's where I spent my entire 3 years when I was at the seminary, at Home Church. Some of the longest and most memorable communions I had at home church. I think the first time I'd ever had one on a Friday evening. And we would, copy what we felt was the New Testament model. Most of us, not all of us, but most of us were younger, and we thought, we were cutting edge and all of that sort of thing. And we were, we were. We didn't just think it, we were. And, we would have a meal before our communion, which, by the way, is what they did in the New Testament. And I remember one Friday, I spent the whole day helping another classmate of mine make homemade ravioli for the communion service that night. Had never done that before. And we shared our meal, then we went into the communion, and such a relaxed time, and we didn't feel the constraints of any schedules. And certainly for students being done with school on a Friday, you got to just forget everything. And so it really was a beautiful time as we came together, and after the communion would share testimonies and people would go on, and it was just a tremendously uplifting experience. We would go on camping trips together, spiritual retreats together. It was all about being together. Together. It didn't matter whether you were single, you were married. Most of us were single, by the way. There were some couples. Most of us were younger, but there were a few older folks. And it was a place where people took care of each other. Maybe you've experienced that. I had a car back then. It was if I can remember, I think it was a 1971 Datsun. Okay, that's before Nissan came along. Datsun, some of you can remember that. And it had a habit of going through starters. And I got pretty good at replacing starters. But one time when it didn't start, I didn't have the $60 to buy the starter to replace the bad one. And so I couldn't drive anywhere, but a short time later I found an envelope at my apartment with the $60 that I needed from my friends there at home church, hearing that I had a need. It was an important and pivotal place for many people. Home church, this relatively little place compared to PMC, Pioneer Memorial Church. And there was actually a small book that some of the founders wrote about home church. And in that book, they took some quotes from people about what home church meant to them. I'm going to try. Yes, very good. And I want to share a few of those with you this morning, and I want you to just pay attention to them and see if you notice a thread, a theme that runs through them. Okay? Christy said, "It is a place of spiritual renewal." Tom, "It is caring friendships." Terry, "It's not only a hospital for me, that is a place where I can go when I'm sick, but also a real growing edge. It will help me to become what God wants me to be." Kent, "It is a fellowship that brings us close together." Dwayne said, "It is a place where God is not your only friend." I like that, don't you? Lad, and I whenever I see Lad's name, I get a picture and I know Lad's story. And when he says this, it's true. It is my lifeline. Rosie, "It is a New chance. Is that what it said? Yes. It is a new chance. Lori, it is a place to bring wavering friends. So it's a safe place. Was a safe place. Chris, it is a deep commitment to others. Ben, who's the fellow I made the ravioli with, by the way, it is a living and compelling memory of people. Certainly not the building, the basement. Debbie, it is my home. Linda, it's a place where everybody counts. And finally, Chuck, it is a springboard for people who are down. I know Chuck's story too. Chuck had been down. He knew about down. So, does it make you wish you could experience a home church? I hope so. It's a beautiful thing to know that kind of closeness and community. To be able to belong to a fellowship where you feel valued, you're known, not just by a name tag, that's a good start, but you're known for who you are. And you can come just the way that you are. And while you may have noticed different sorts of comments there, many of them focused on the community aspect of the church. You know, the fellowship, the one another process, finding friends, fitting in, being appreciated. You know, you could come as you are. Just, bring all your baggage. And people are going to take you. They're going to receive you. They're going to help you. Also in the book, there were some lengthier comments, and I want to share 3 of those with you because I think they're very significant. And so the first of the lengthy comments, yes, very good. Please notice these carefully as well. Since home church meets my needs, I stay at home church. Do you notice that? That's tremendously important, is it not? Home church meets my needs. I'm going to stay at home church because it meets my needs. I think we could say conversely, if a church does not meet one's needs, it's very likely you're not going to stay at that church, right? So that's a very important observation and experience that this one person commented on. Notice the second thing that they said. Also, I'm able to reveal my spiritual problems to others in fellowship. And that in itself is significant, isn't it? Don't always have to be a certain way, to wear that facade. You can reveal spiritual problems. Spiritual problems. To admit that you're not always perhaps as good as you might appear. And what happens, it says, notice, where they are treated with kindness, with an I've been there too feeling. And then they are prayed about by other members. And pretty soon my problem is solved. So two significant things. Needs get met, and you can come as you are. You can share your weakness and know that you're going to get help. Another person, I got 2 more lengthier things I want to share with you. Home church has shown me what true Christian fellowship can be. And what I find significant about that is that it isn't just what we were taught. You know, it's one thing to teach or to preach to somebody how things ought to be. But it's a completely other thing to experience that. True? You know, teaching and preaching is the easy part. But when you actually put it into practice, and someone doesn't just hear how things ought to be, or here's what you should do, but rather, I am shown. You know, I experience what Christian fellowship, what community is all about. That's a tremendous attribute of any church. She goes on, or he goes on, I'm not sure who said this one. It not only has been meaningful to me for Sabbath worship, but for community spirit that it fosters throughout the whole week. So you know what that tells me? It's not just one day a week, for 1 hour a week, or 2 hours a week, or 3 hours a week, or however long our worship lasts, but it's something that spreads and covers the whole week. That there's this sense of attachment and community and friendship that is more than just one day. We need that, don't we? I need that. Goes on to say, I have learned in home church what it really means to minister to brothers and sisters and to be ministered to by them. So again, there's that practical aspect of I'm caring for people and they're caring for me. It's this gracious cycle that goes round and round where we come into a church that it's like a laboratory. And we don't just hear about it, but we actually put it into practice. All right, one more observation. I like this one very much as well. There is a real feeling of what? Belonging. Belonging. That's important. And they go on to say, and this is good, that I've never felt at any large church. Sabbath has been a real joy for me since I've gone to home church. Before, I dreaded Sabbath because I went to church all alone and felt all alone. Now, I don't know if they were talking about PMC or some other church. But this is significant because we're a larger church. And it's possible to come to a large church with a lot of people, and you come by yourself, and even though there are a lot of people, you still feel alone. Which is a challenge. You know, bigger churches have certain challenges that smaller churches don't have. And so I'm glad for what we're doing this first quarter. We are one in community. And today and going forward, we want to see how we can improve our ability to help people to feel that they belong. I'm sure that if I hadn't started going to home church, I would have stopped going to church altogether. Because who wants to go to any size church where there's lots of people and still feel alone? That defeats, certainly, part of the purpose of church, does it not? So that's a little snapshot of home church. Sorry you didn't get to see the picture of PMC. Just imagine TPC about twice as big. Okay, there we go. Looks familiar, doesn't it? That's the outside and then the inside. Maybe, yes. Taken from the balcony, it looks like, in the back. And, whoa. It's not that dark, actually. Thank you, Theon. Did you know that the New Testament church started out as a home church? Did you know that? Got a few scriptures to share with you. Just so you don't think that, well, these people were just making this stuff up. No, it's in the Bible. Look at Romans 16:3-5. Paul writes to the believers there in Rome. He says, "Greet Priscilla and Aquila. Please give my greetings to the church that meets in their home." Had you seen those verses before? And then also in, not sure the next one, Colossians, as he concludes his letter. "Please give my greetings to our Christian brothers and sisters at Laodicea and to Nympha and those who meet in her house." And literally, one version as it says, the church that meets in her house. So there was a group of believers that met in Nympha's house. And then finally, I think it's Philemon, Paul again writes, "I am also writing to the church that meets in your house." So the first New Testament churches met in the homes of the early believers. Now, we're not going to start having home churches, I don't think. That's not my plan. Although there are certainly many, many positive things about a home church, a house church. But I would say there are traits, there are characteristics of them that we would do well to incorporate into the life of TPC. Because people are still looking for community, a place to belong. And I would submit that the times we live in, that idea or that experience, community, can be one of the most powerful tools we have for evangelism. If we have a place where people can come, and some of you will remember that slogan, to be a place where everyone knows your name. And not just because you're wearing a name tag. You feel valued and appreciated. You feel known. Now, most people today, I believe, they're not interested in truth per se. They aren't. Most people are not concerned about correct doctrine. Most people are struggling with whether to believe or not to believe, much less the details of that belief. But I would say that all people are searching for something to give their lives meaning. And again, just about everyone is looking for a place to belong. They're looking for community. And as we know, just looking around, not just at churches, but all these different organizations, I don't believe it's the focus of the organization that attracts people so much as the idea that they get to enjoy that particular thing in community. And I would say, especially, we live in a high-tech world, do we not? We do. But high-tech often equates to low touch, low community. And in this environment, relationships have become as quick and shallow as a text message. And we have something a lot better than a text message, don't we? Yeah, something long-lasting and deep. Now we read for our scripture, and I want us to just look through that for just a few moments. And I know we're going to be looking at this passage. It's a significant passage in Acts 2. The next few months. And I would ask for each of us to prayerfully consider, spend more time on, apart from our worship services, Acts chapter 2, verses 42 through 47. Because it talks about the early church. Let's see, did I have a picture before that, Zion? I'm not sure. Was there a picture of it? Yes, okay. We need to see this. Some of you might get the Washington Post, at least on Sundays. We get it. And every Sunday there's the Sunday magazine. And towards the end of it, they always have this little game or puzzle, 2 pictures. You know where I'm going with this? And they'll say, the second picture has 12 differences from the first picture. And some of you have already found 6 of them. Not me. I'll spend about a minute looking at the second picture, and if I find 2 or 3, I've won. But there's 12 differences in the second picture compared to the first. So how are they alike? How are they different? Now I'd like us to go to Acts chapter 2 with that illustration and to think about, here's a picture of the early church. And don't we often say, well, we want to be like the early church? And very often we focus on, we want to have the same belief system as the early church, which is good. We should. But sometimes we forget and we don't think about, we want to have the same practice, the same behavior as the early church. We do, don't we? We should. So I want us to look for just a few minutes at this description that we read in our scripture this morning about the early church. And as we read through those, and going forward, how is TPC like the early church? How are we different from the early church? And if we're different, how can we be more like the early church? Because that's our model, isn't it? Shouldn't we want to be more like this early church? So, just breaking down, there's a description of 6 or 8 things. It says, they, the early believers, devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching. So that tells us, as it says, they were a studying church. That's a good thing, right? It's good to know what you believe, certainly, and it's good to know right from wrong. It's good to have true doctrine. It says they were also devoted to the fellowship. That means to the body. They were devoted to one another. The word there for fellowship is koinonia. You've heard that term, I'm sure. It means to hold in common. And because of their commitment to Christ, they were devoted to each other. They held in common this shared faith, and it brought them together. Going on, it says they were also devoted to the breaking of bread. This can be interpreted a couple ways. It means that they enjoyed having communion. They enjoyed sharing their meals together. And again, very often they would be done together. The meal, the communion. They also, as it says, were devoted to prayer, which tells us they were a praying church. Also, the people in the church there, it says, everyone was filled with awe. When's the last time you felt awe at church? If you were here last Sabbath afternoon for our communion, I think you did then. Yes. But there was this sense of wonder at what's happening. So church was an exciting place to be. And it also says miraculous signs were being done by the apostles. So again, there was this reality that God was at work in this group of people. Couple more, I believe. Yes. Connected to an earlier description, it says all the believers were together and had everything in common. That's a hard one, isn't it? It is. Talks about they sold their property and they put their money together, and whoever was in need would receive from that. There was unity and sharing because of that fellowship, that koinonia. Every day, it says, they continued to meet together in the temple courts. What does that say? They spent a lot of time at church. Maybe two more, I believe there are. And while at church, they were praising God. So they were a worshiping church. And then finally, two more. They enjoyed the favor of all the people. So it means that they had good relationships with other people around them in the community. They were a positive influence. And then finally, the Lord added to their number daily those who were being saved. And that's very obvious. They were a growing church. They were a growing church. So again, I would challenge each of us, invite us to get very acquainted with this section of Acts chapter 2. And to see how we can become more like that early church. One thing that sticks out in that description, and as I talked about home church, was just the idea of community. And I want you to take that thought home with you from worship today. This idea of community is something that was once very common to people, but it's less common today. Many of us can remember growing up in places where community was a part of your daily life. And if you needed help, you didn't call somebody and talk to them and find out they were in the Philippines, but rather you went to a neighbor and you would get your food from farmers, and you listened to music in groups or at church or on front porches. There was this participation. And community, when you experience community, that's a place where you become your best self. You know joy. And we know that this is not a guess. One person has written about this, and she comments that there is evidence that community is the best place to grow and prosper as a person. There are actually scholars who study this. They study social well-being, and they can put it on graphs and charts. And the conclusion to all that is, listen to me, the happiest people are the ones with the most community. This person goes on to say, she says, in the last 30 years, our material wealth has increased in this country. That's true. But our self-described happiness has steadily declined. So we've gotten richer materially, but when it comes to happiness, it's got less and less. Elsewhere, the people who consider themselves very happy are not, are not in the poorest nations, as we might guess. That's not true. But neither are they in the very richest nations. The winners, would you like to know the winners? The winners are Mexico, Ireland, Puerto Rico. The kinds of places where we identify with extended family. Noisy villages, personal interaction, a lot of dancing. Again, the happiest people are the ones with the most community. George Bernard Shaw, the English playwright, he was something of a skeptic when it came to religious matters. He was once asked, you see his answer, but you don't know the question. He was once asked what he thought of Christianity. And his reply was, it might work if they tried it. It might work if they tried it. And I believe we're in a society, a culture, where people are still waiting for us to try it, to live it, to show it. To be a church like the early church. A place that's filled with wonder. Because God is doing something there. You can come and feel this sense of awe, being together in worship, because something supernatural is taking place. A church where people from all walks of life come and they're one. They're one. And they are experiencing this beautiful thing we call community. Are you ready to try it? Are you ready to try it as we go forward this new year, 2017? I challenge us to, by God's grace, be the body, the church, like those early believers were, and to create this atmosphere of community, or to realize the community that we've been given through Jesus Christ, and invite others in to share in what God has given to us. So God bless us towards that end, 2017. May we be more of the community He has called us to be. Amen.